Welcome to Deep Thought, religious subcultures in the black community. You know what? I want to go back to that subcultural theme, and because the thing with any subculture, it creates a different type of energy. There's different energies within a different way of people thinking, and there's a tendency to think there's not that many subcultures in the black community because one, they tend to be measured the same way as they would be in, say, the greater community, the mainstream community. Like, you can look at somebody and tell they're a hipster, or you can look at somebody and tell they're a redneck, or that they're into the tattoo culture, right? And because it's more of a visual thing. It's not as much a visual thing in at least the African American community, right? But there are still subcultures based more on spiritual beliefs. And that's a key to understanding behavior in the black community. Understand where the African American community is the most churched community in America. Let me say that again, the most churched community. Any understanding of any behavior in the community has to start with religious and spiritual affiliation. It has to. I even said that about politics. I told a white man that. I said, you want to understand stuff. I mean, it's the ministers that control stuff in the black community. Now, when we talk about subcultures, remember, if you look, like, one of the things I can get, like, I remember I was working on a job. It was a retail job. It had several different black women, but it was interesting. All of them behaved really according to their religious beliefs, right? You had some women, they were like hardcore into it, so they behaved that way. You had one woman, she didn't show any interest in anything spiritual, though ultimately you never know. She behaved another way. And then you had a sister who was more on that, for lack of a better term, hotep tip, more Pan-Africanist, more spiritual, like that African traditionalist and stuff. And, then you had some, church affiliation, but, it wasn't dominating their behavior. And, when you look at the subcultures, it has an effect on a lot of things, and you can't really analyze any behavior. See, one of the mistakes, and especially a lot of maybe some racists or someone who wants to put down a black community, they'll say something about IQ and all of that, and I'm like, but that's going to depend on their spiritual beliefs, because it's a cultural thing. Understand, religion is more, any religious spiritual system is not just like, some salvation or you like praying to some supreme being. It's a behavior system. Every single spiritual system has a way of people behaving. Like we talk about relationships, right? A lot of people don't want to say this or talk about this, but many black Christians have more solid relationships, or at least the surface of it. Yeah, there's some stuff, and yeah, the minister might be boffing them, but at least on the surface, we'll try to make a go of it. And then, of course, that's going to depend on the denomination and their interpretation, right? Or even in the, it's if you have a denomination or path that says, even within the Christian church, black Christian church, you got several. So you have a path that says, hey, the woman's supposed to obey the man. Well, she at least on the surface is going to do that. She's going to be more peaceful with the guy. Or if you got some that might be looser, like you have and this ain't just a Christian church, black Christian church, but you have several strains of Islam. You have the Nation of Islam strain. I'll call it, for lack of a better term, Black Islam. Right? Started here, but it's not the same as more Orthodox Islam. There's going to be a change what they emphasize more, how they dress. maybe more of a focus on intellect. Like, for example, to me, there's a big difference in dealing with maybe a woman associated with the more Black Islam strain, and then the Orthodox strain, and then dealing with a Black Christian. And I mean, it's deep. Like the women I've dealt with who were more influenced by the Black Islam strain, they tended to be more rational thinking. More supportive of patriarchal type of thinking, right? Then the Orthodox, there's a tendency to be more, I'll say peaceful. I'll use that term. But then that extends, but then you have maybe some women who were more influenced by African traditional religion, right? So, and that's more, one thing about that influences the behavior, because you have goddesses who you're acknowledging goddesses. So the women may be a little bit more assertive, more like to, go just do their thing. And, it also affects dressing. Like one of the young ladies that I had worked with, she was a part of a Christian denomination that didn't believe in wearing pants. And I think the only time I've ever seen her in a pair of pants was when she was modeling something. Modeling some pants, because she did some stuff as a model. But any other time, I was always a dress. And at least always trying to act feminine. She was a tomboy, so it was some struggle with her. Love her though. Anyway, right. That's the big thing. Like, if I've had some people, I mentioned the subcultures, and people say, well, what's going, can I give some examples of one? That's it. If you just look in the community, that's going to tell. If I'm talking with somebody and they express some indication of their spiritual belief, I already know this is how it's going to be with them. This is how you got to deal with them, and how they going to respond to you. And it even affects, it has a strong effect on even how Black men and Black women will relate to each other. Because like I said, in Islamic, when the women are more Islamic, or the people are more Islamic, there's a certain way they treat each other. If they, depending on whether they Black Islamic or more Orthodox, right? Or if they in the African traditions, right? How the men and women interact with each other. Like the women, one thing, and it's far from perfect, but there's I don't know, the African tradition, I'm going to be honest, the relationships, it's a weird thing, because I think you only have a small percentage of folks a lot of people like on the surface with it, but not fully initiated. And that's another conversation. But then also, if the women consider themselves Christian, and, there's more or less, okay, there's a bit more real respect for Black men. Just a bit more. All right. In fact, one thing I've noticed when you talk about the unchurched, or, they're not really as much into a spiritual thing, those are usually the women who, and people who really have a little bit more of a problem relating. And it's an interesting dynamic, very, very interesting dynamic. And it's not hardcore. There's a lot to be said, but it still makes a difference, because let's take the religion thing again. It will affect what you'll eat. A lot of people who practice the Kemetic path, right, have a strong tendency towards veganism. Very strong tendency. Even some people who might be more, I'll say, into the African traditions, even though veganism isn't a big thing there. But it does affect the behavior. And when you look at any of the subcultures, there's affect what clothes you're going to buy, how you're going to behave, where you might live, how you're going to interact on a job, how you're going to look towards education, how you're going to look towards the greater culture. And it's deep. If you really want to understand it and see the differences, look towards it. because it even affects who you want to vote for politically. Because, you know, you have a lot of black conservatives. They also tend to be strongly Christian, depending on their, you know, certain denominations. So, you know, and it's just to think, it's something to think about. It's deep. It's deep. Probably worthy of a book. But it's one of the things I look at when you think about a subculture, because it's going to, the different religion. If you have, like, dealt with a lot of people who practice one of the Black Islam forms. Yeah, wouldn't touch a pepperoni pizza, or at least a pepperoni part. You know, hardcore about that beef, that pork thing. Even though it pretty, unfortunately, probably everything that you eat has been cooked in pork one way or the other. It's hard to really avoid it. But, you know, it's something to think about. It's affecting how you're eating, how you're relating to a certain extent, everything. So, something to look at. And there's always something to think about. Anyway, I'll get back with y'all. Peace and blessings.